always said I wanted to be general counsel of a high-growth health technology company working with amazing people on a mission I believed in, and yet I was miserable. All right, yeah, this is what I said I wanted, but what do I actually want from my life? What would it take to actually be happy? So for me, success means it's simple stuff. It's waking up every day and feeling genuinely excited to dive into my life, running these different experiments to grow different parts of myself, viewing my life as an opportunity for self-discovery, and seeing what is it that I like doing. When you are chronically underslept, it's basically as if you are also drunk. And most of us would never practice law while we are inebriated. My desire for overachievement, to impress others, my perfectionism, all of these things that I think can really power ourselves, like our careers academically and power our careers professionally. All the worst versions of them came out, but don't overthink it. As lawyers, we're really analytical. We're really good at arguing both sides. And I think that for most of us, when it comes to our own lives, we can overweigh those arguments that are in favor of the status quo.
This is the Lawyer to Leader podcast for lawyers who've mastered the law and are ready to master the rest. I'm your host, Jonathan Cullen. Today, I'm joined by Allison Canton. But first, before we dive in, two things. If you enjoy the show, follow or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. It helps us reach more lawyers who need this. And if you're ready to make the shift from technical advisor to trusted leader, head on over to jonathancullencoaching.com. Grab your free leadership assessment. All this will be in the show notes. Now let's get into it. This is the Lawyer to Leader podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Cullen. Our guest today is Allison Canton. Allison spent years checking every box on the traditional success list: Harvard Law, BigLaw, general counsel at high-growth startups where she scaled legal teams through Hypergrowth and a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Then came the uncomfortable realization the work she excelled at was also making her miserable. She didn't leave the law. She rebuilt her relationship with it. Today, Allison is a senior advisor at Markups.ai, where she helps legal teams use AI to move from contract processors to strategic partners. And through her new project, Fit to Practice, she teaches entertaining, practical, and data-backed CLE programs to help high-achieving lawyers protect their most valuable asset, their well-being. She also writes and podcasts about ambition, meaning, and life after chasing gold stars on her Substack, Practically on Purpose. Allison, welcome to the show.
Well, Jonathan, it is so great to be here. I was thrilled when you reached out. I just felt like we were kindred spirits, both posting like kind of unhinged things on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
so when you're like, let's hang out, I was like, yes, let's hang out. That sounds fun.
Yeah, I love it. And like you said, it's exactly right. I mean, we quote unquote met on LinkedIn, and I found one of your posts was profoundly funny, which has a shockingly high value for me. And I just dug in and thought about your story and how interesting it was. And to me, I figured it would be cool to have the audience meet you and really dive into what happens when the resume looks perfect, but doesn't match the inside. And you know why high achievers, especially lawyers, fall into that trap, and how you found your way out of burnout into a completely different place. And just really, I found that fascinating to me. So I'd love to dive into all of that.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
Awesome. So maybe when you're not sure where to start, we start at the start. So I'll take you back a little bit and I'll ask you, what was first year law Allison like?
Well, it was not a pretty sight, I have to tell you. First of all, I wasn't planning on going to law school. I'll tell you, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, people would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say anything but a lawyer. That was my answer. So, as a first year law student, I'm wondering, part of me is like, what the heck am I doing here? And the answer was I'd planned to get a PhD, actually. I wanted to be a professor of sociology and social policy, studying the effects of mass incarceration on families and communities. And I had the thought that if I really wanted to make an impact through my research, um, I should understand all these systems that are operating on people's lives. So kind of on a lark, honestly, I was like, oh, I'll like sit for the LSAT and I'll go to law school too, and that'll be my thing. Well, the way that these things work for joint programs, basically, I got into the law school at Harvard, but I didn't get into the PhD program. And then everyone around me said, well, obviously you're going to Harvard Law. And I said to them, remember, I'm trying to get a PhD. I don't actually want to go to law school. But, I didn't really know how things worked. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just like work on my PhD application while I'm a first year. How hard could that be? Obviously, I didn't do that. And what happened instead is kind of all of the worst habits in me, my desire for overachievement, my desire to impress others, my perfectionism, all of these things that I think can really power ourselves, like our careers academically and power our careers professionally. All the worst versions of them came out. So I basically stopped sleeping. I wouldn't sleep for 2 to 3 days at a time because I was so anxious. I had so much reading to do. And then I was in like an extra gunnerish section. So everyone's like, oh, well, you didn't happen to read like the treatise and the hornbook on blah, blah, blah. Because if you did, then you would know this other thing that Professor so-and-so really cares about. So I just felt completely overwhelmed. Um, and it was so bad, I realized like one can't just keep not sleeping for 2 or 3 days, that I started meditating. I started listening to sleep meditations to deal with my crippling anxiety. And eventually I started sleeping normally, more or less, again after that. But yeah, I was not a pleasant person, I think, to be around as a 1L.
How did you, just out of curiosity, how did you like land on the meditation as an option? Was that something you were doing before and you sort of doubled down, or is it something you discovered at the time?
No, it's a good question. So I was a book Buddhist since I was 15. So I would read a lot about it. And again, this is like classic lawyer stuff where I'm like, I'm going to read everything possible about Buddhism, but I'm not going to get my butt on the cushion. Like, I don't need to do that. I don't have time for that. So it had been the seed in the back of my head of like, oh, meditation's probably a good thing. But I didn't start with Buddhist meditation. I actually just started like Googling sleep, like SOS, please help me sleep. I'm not sleeping and I'm crazy. And a sleep meditation popped up and I just started doing that. And then that was actually my entry point into what is now, a 15 plus year daily meditation practice.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I definitely want to dive in more to that. Your story reminds me of when I took the LSAT. At the time, I was, I don't remember how far along, somewhere in a psychology program. I had done my bachelor's and I was thinking of doing a master's. And I sat in the LSAT, and I don't know what they were called, invigilator or whatever, the person like monitoring
The
was like,
proctor. Mm-hmm.
yeah, thank you. Yeah. Was the like lead PhD person in my psychology program. And he kind of looked me in the eyes, and I looked at him, and there was a realization I wasn't continuing in psychology. And he's like, carry on. That kind of messed me up while I was trying to take the exam. But anyways.
Yeah, totally.
So,
Totally.
so at the beginning, so from Harvard to BigLaw, like it sounds like. Tell me about that, because at that point, it sounds like you're going in relatively a straight line. Like, what did that feel like at the time?
Yeah, well, let's say I realized probably halfway through 1L that I definitely wasn't going for that PhD. That wasn't going to happen. But I thought, oh, well, there's a lot of good that I can do. So I ended up going into big law, a little bit of a force of inertia. It was 2009 when I started law school. And at first I was like, well, I'm not going to interview at any big firms because I'm a public interest person and da 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 da. And a few very kind friends sat me down and they're like, sweetheart, lawyers do not have jobs right now. And if the biggest and best firms in the world are like begging to hire, Harvard Law students, you better get your butt into OCI and start interviewing. And like, also, you're going to have these loans. So you're going to need to deal with those. Um, so I ended up going into big law, practiced healthcare law, which was actually a fantastic place for me to, marry my public interest desire, start working on social systems, things like that, with the opportunity to practice at a really high level. I actually liked being a big law associate. I was at Ropes and Gray in the healthcare group, and honestly, the people there were just fantastic. The matters were fascinating. The only problem with it is that, when you go to big law, they're basically buying 100% of your time. So that wasn't a great match for, Allison, who's already kind of anxious, perfectionist, already does too much all of the time. I mean, for my partners, for my employer, it was fantastic for them. But for me personally, that was the point when, you're really trained to start making all of these sacrifices for your work. You're trained to stop thinking about yourself. You're trained to not really sleep, to order in 3 times a day, to stop working out, to stop really taking care of yourself. And when you're doing all of those things, you're told, all right, that's awesome. Like you're doing it right. This is what good looks like.
Wow, yeah. So was that sort of the push to go in-house? Like, what was your thinking in that transition?
No, you know what? I had so drank the Kool-Aid that I actually thought that I was going to stay at Ropes, and there was a partner that I was working with, an amazing lawyer, Stephen Warnke. He sadly just passed about 2 months ago. He really invested in my training, so I could have stayed there a long time, but a recruiter reached out, and she was basically like, I've got 2 options for you. Either you can go work at this private equity firm that's focused on healthcare, or there's this really cool cancer research startup. And at the time, my cousin, who she and I were like raised like siblings, basically, she had just been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And it really just seemed like an incredible opportunity to use my legal skills for good and for a cause that was really near and dear to my heart. It turned out that company was Flatiron Health. It was, at the time, one of the biggest health technology startups in New York City. I was there as the second lawyer, the first regulatory lawyer for a healthcare startup, which is like a little hands-on, I guess we'll say. I had a lot of opportunities to use many of the skills that I'd developed at Ropes and Gray. And we were the success story. Like, we were sold to Roche for $2 billion. It was the biggest health tech exit from a New York City startup at the time, and stayed there for a few years after the acquisition, really to see what it's like, being part of a much bigger company.
Yeah, what was that like?
Honestly, I'm a startup person. Like I was like, this is kind of boring. At first, it was fun working on the integration, and obviously the access and platform of Roche was amazing. Finally getting paid at market was like really nice after stepping away from big law salary. But I really had the startup bug, and a few years later, enough people from Flatiron had started to leave, and a few of us were like, let's get the band back together. And I made the insane decision to join another startup as the 10th employee, which, most lawyers, I would say, honestly, I'd say to like Allison in retrospect, like most lawyers have no business being at a company as employee 10, because you're still at the phase where you're like, are we building a plane or a submarine or a hot dog stand? And as a lawyer, you have to be able to really sit with the uncertainty of like, I'm going to give this advice. It's on, here's 10 half-baked facts that are probably going to change 10 minutes from now, and be willing to advise and from that level of uncertainty. And honestly, for a long time, I was having a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to me like, all the lawyers who want to narrow the issues that come to them. But in the scenario you're talking about, you're getting what you get and you got to deal with it. I mean, what an experience that is.
And then I ended up very quickly growing into running the people team, running sort of semi-running finance for a bit, which is a little scary because I stopped taking math after 11th grade. But I'm like, I'm running payroll. I'm figuring out benefits. Someone's like, what's our policy on holidays? And the co-founders were like, I don't know. I think there's a law about holidays. So Allison, like, can you advise on that? Can you come up with that? So again, it was a lot of fun, but definitely flying by the seat of my pants.
So it sounds like you're feeling like you're hitting all the professional highs, the successes. So what happened? Like, I know you had some personal challenges. Walk me through, where were you? How did that start?
Yeah. So I would say that the first year and a half at the startup, I was having a lot of fun. Like I said, working on all sorts of different kinds of problems. The challenge is the company was getting bigger and bigger. It was really in a hyper growth moment. And the surface area, both for our employees and our business, and the issues that were coming up were becoming more and more complex. I had the good fortune to have a bit of a team. I had like 2 or 3 people on the combined legal and people teams who were helping me, and some other great folks within the business who were supporting me. But I was so used to being the one who did it all at a really high level of execution, trying to keep it all together. I had also made the big move 2 years prior to move outside of New York City to the Hudson Valley because I was like, oh, I'm going to do a slower pace of life. Then I joined a startup and I'm working 12-hour days sitting in front of my computer, and I've got the Hudson Valley's like beautiful rolling hills tempting me from behind my computer
Contrast.
screen. And I'm just sitting here. I mean, at least if I were in the city, there would be good takeout. I could like see a movie after work. I could see friends. But instead, I was kind of in the worst of both worlds. And I hit a breaking point. I would say I knew that I wasn't happy, but I feel like as a lawyer, we tend to have like a really high tolerance for pain and discontent. And I also think that many of us sell ourselves short. So at least for me, again, because like I'm Buddhist, I believe in reincarnation. I would tell myself things like, oh, I'll just be happy in the next lifetime. Like, this is not a lifetime.
Wow, the ultimate procrastination.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I was like, oh, yeah. I'll handle happiness next time. This time I'm just going to do like the work grindy thing. Next time I'll be happy. But there was a part of me that really refused to accept that level of discontent. And I'll never forget. I remember one morning I woke up, it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. My mind is racing. And I'm like, I just have all of these things in my head that I need to get out. So I pick up a notebook and a pen right next to my bed. And in the middle of the night, I'm just scribbling, I hate this. I can't do this anymore. This is killing me. I need to leave, in all caps. And I look at it the next, I put it down and then I'm able to go back to sleep. But I look at it the next morning and I'm like, okay, I am not okay. And something needs to change.
So how did you land on what that something was going to be?
Well, I'm smiling because at the time I was working a part-time schedule, which I had one small child at the time, and I was working a part-time schedule. And because, again, lawyer, like glutton for punishment, I said to myself, oh, well, the issue is that I'm actually not giving enough dedicated time to work. So the first thing that I did was go from a part-time schedule to a full-time schedule.
It's quite the fix.
Quite the fix. Because again, I was like in such denial. And I thought, oh, law, it has to be hard, right? And this is my big job. This is my dream job. I always said I wanted to be general counsel of a high growth health technology company working with amazing people on a mission I believed in. And yet I was miserable. So it was hard for me to actually like turn it around to myself and say, all right, yeah, this is what I said I wanted, but what do I actually want from my life? What would it take to actually be happy? And, after like realizing that going full time and doing even more of the thing that was burning me out and making me sick and all of that wasn't working, I realized that I had to leave. And everyone said to me, well, what are you going to do next? Are you interviewing? Are you going to go to a bigger company? Are you going to go to a different type of startup, a different industry? And I just said no to all of that. I just knew that I needed to make some time and space. One, to get my health in order. The other thing was like my husband and I had been trying to have a second kid for like a year and nothing was sticking. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm turning 40. Like I gotta get serious. Like if I want to have a kid, I gotta get serious about this. And actually just make space in my life for me to get to know myself again and to really start feeding the things that lit me up, and shedding the things that it turned out were actually dragging me down.
Now, before we continue, everything Allison and I are talking about today, the Lawyer to Leader assessment at jonathancullencoaching.com. They can help evaluate where you are in your growth journey as a lawyer. Free, 5 minutes in the show notes. Back to it. And when you got to know yourself, who did you find?
Well, first of all, I was just tired. I slept a lot. I of course got pregnant within like 3 weeks or something of leaving after trying for a whole year, and nothing working. And I think that a lot of that had to do with, the default level of stress and overwhelm and cortisol, that my body was swimming in. But once I finally stepped away, I realized that I had sort of cut off these pieces of myself to fit into the box of what I thought professional achievement looked like in the law. And the thing is, like when we all think about a high achieving lawyer, I think that we all probably have like a pretty polished mental frame. Like when you look at, to take one of the legal tech companies, like, well, Harvey or Lagora, right? You've got like the dude from Suits, you've got Jude Law, right? Like we think about that level of polish, but behind that level of polish is actually, like denying pieces of ourselves. So I realized, I was like, actually, I think I'm a pretty creative person. I like writing. I have a flower arranging practice. I love music. I've got to Burning Man. That's super fun. And those were all pieces of myself that I feel like I kind of like denied or pushed away because they weren't consistent with what I thought a real lawyer, and certainly a successful real lawyer, looked like. I'll tell you, I have a friend from law school who is an incredible writer. She's one of my favorite writers, and she's general counsel at a high growth technology company. And she's written 2 amazing books, and she's not going to publish them until she's done being a lawyer, because she also carries this belief, which I think many, many lawyers do, and maybe for reasons, rightly and wrongly, that she will not be taken seriously if she's also a novelist. Like, to be taken seriously, she really needs to only inhabit this one identity that has these really clean markers.
That's really interesting. How did you feel when you started to have this realization that I liked your imagery about how you were forced to sort of cut out the parts that didn't fit in the box? Were you slowly regaining those parts, discovering new parts? Like, how did you feel?
It was scary because at first I felt like I didn't even really know who I was without the law. And then I started working with a creativity coach who she also came from the tech world and was really helpful at getting me to run these small experiments, because also in my, as lawyers, we're perfectionists and we're really good at coming up with plans and following plans. So it was hard for me to not go to like the 100% version of something. So I'll just give you an example. I knew that I loved, or not loved, I knew that I enjoyed teaching meditation. I actually taught meditation at my last 2 startups. It was just something I put on everyone's calendar because I was like, we all need this. Like, we need to get our minds right. And I thought that that's something that I might want to do more of, and like more in my community, in my small town. So of course, perfectionist version of Allison goes, well, if I'm going to teach meditation, the first thing I need to do is make sure I have like 10 different certifications and that it's the best certification from the best place, that I have a website and that the website is like sleek, and beautiful, and that I have a core set of offerings and I have a marketing plan, all of this stuff, like nonsense. My coach goes, how about you try offering meditation once in your town and make a little survey for yourself about, what are the questions that you're trying to answer for yourself in offering it? Obviously, do you like it? Do other people like it? What do you like about it? And then I also did surveys for the people who participated in order for me to get feedback. And it was great because I started getting in the habit of running these really small experiments. And it wasn't like, I'm going to become a meditation teacher, so here's this whole huge offering that I've invested and poured so much of myself into. It was really just inviting friends like, hey, I'm going to offer a meditation session one time. Like, I would love your feedback on it. Will you come sit with me in my backyard? Those are 2 totally different things. But so often, and when I'm talking to other lawyer friends who are considering trying out new things, whether, it's a hobby or a career pivot or whatever, because of our training, we can't help ourselves but to go to the 100% version. And then what happens is we work on the website for like 3 months, 4 months, and then we never actually start doing the thing. We kind of just get stuck.
Yeah, that sounds exactly. I mean, it's kind of like ingrained in us, right? Like you to get out of law school, to get the big jobs, like you've got to be in a way 100% in, and it's got to have very sharp edges and a clear, vision. And I'm executing on that vision, and it's big, which doesn't leave a lot of room for messiness and experimentation, even though that's often what we're asking our clients to do, right? Like, just experiment, see how it goes, get some data, then we'll adjust the risk tolerance and all that. But we don't tend to do that ourselves. And I had a similar experience with coaching, where I coached in my own time while I was practicing, just to see, did I like it? What would my clients be like? What would their challenges be like? And like, adjust from there. To your point, because otherwise it felt too daunting. Like, I'm going to just drop my career and just start, a big second career with no data, no sense of what it'll be like. So I really like that, starting small. And I like the word you used too, in your own community, like start with the people around you and see if there's an interest there. And because at the end of the day, like, you didn't get into that to be a marketer. You got into it to do the thing because you enjoyed the thing and you wanted to share the thing with people, I would assume.
Yes, exactly. And but I think that, as lawyers, we're so used to thinking about structures that it's it's hard for us to do anything but, kind of engineer the thing before we even know what the thing is, or even if we want to do it.
I really like your truism about how lawyers tend to have that high pain threshold. So not necessarily like having the alarm bells ring inside. But what do you think are some of the signs that people might miss in themselves, that they're unraveling a little bit, that they should take those alarm bells a little bit more seriously?
Yeah. So a few things that I noticed in myself. I was so impatient and so speedy. And, my son, he was like 3 at the time, he'd be like, "Hey, mommy, like I just came home from school and I want to show you this cool thing that I made and this whatever." And I'd be on my phone and be like, "Stop it," like snapping at him, or like, "Mommy's just got to finish this email. And like, this is the most important thing." And, definitely doing the same thing with my husband. Bless him for sticking around, because like I was not, again, a delightful version of myself to be around. Man, and then the other thing that I really remember was just this feeling of heaviness. And, I'm someone who in my 20s was prone to depression. That's not something that I've fortunately dealt with in more recent years, but it was almost a precursor to it, that like I felt like something was hanging over my head. It was this feeling, this feeling of dread, that like there'd be moments during my day that I would enjoy, maybe conversations with colleagues that I really loved, or working on a project that I found exciting. But otherwise, my baseline was like dread of like, how am I going to get through my day, getting ready to go to bed and staying up, way later than I should on the computer, just getting myself all hopped up on like, what's the next project that I have to do? And not because I want to, just because I felt like, oh, this is something that I have to get through. And then I remember most mornings I would wake up and I just felt like I was like, I don't want to do this. So I think if you're having any of those feelings, and then the other one, if folks are a little bit more somatic and tuned into their body, for me, it felt like a tightness in my throat. There was like a clenching or a gripping. And I think that was both the anxiety of like, oh my God, how am I going to do all this? But also the tension of not speaking my truth to myself of, I don't want to be doing this.
Wow, those are very concrete things to look out for. Thank you for sharing those. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I know you're still involved in the legal world, yet you have many more components, and I get the sense that you're more comfortable now. How are you managing to coexist like that? How are you making it work?
Yeah. So right now, I am still in this really experimental mindset. I think that very often it's funny, when we go to law school, or when we're college students thinking about going to law school, people used to say, "Oh, well, go to law school. You can do whatever you want afterwards." Right?
Yeah,
Isn't that what everyone's saying?
I'm saying that to my daughter now. Is this not true?
Well, I think so, but not in the way people think. So people say, "Oh, go to law school. You can do whatever you want." Then like it turns out that you usually end up becoming a lawyer afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And, being a lawyer is a very specific set of skill sets. I would say that nowadays, though, especially with legal AI, but law is such a big profession. So right now, I do a lot of investing and advising in startups where, I'm bringing my legal mind to the table. I'm not necessarily delivering legal advice. I'm usually just referring folks out to the many wonderful law firm partners that I know these days. But it's a lot of fun because it sort of gives me the opportunity to use that analytical part of my brain to engage in company building, but without all of the heaviness of the responsibility of being general counsel at a company or being outside counsel. The other thing that I've been doing is, as you saw, we connected via LinkedIn. So I've started writing for lawyers, both on my Substack and on LinkedIn, reflecting on some of these mindsets and behaviors and attitudes and patterns that make us really great at our jobs, but also tend to make us pretty miserable in our lives. And it's been amazing, the response that I've been getting from that writing. You know, I don't get as many public comments because I think it can be hard for us lawyers to be like, oh, that thing that you wrote about being completely burnt out and overwhelmed, like, oh, that's me too.
Yeah.
But I'll get DMs, I get random text messages and emails, or, I'll be back in New York City visiting folks at my old law firm, and someone will pull me aside and they're like, that thing you wrote, like, I'm in that place. Can we talk?
Yeah.
So that's just been really gratifying. And then the most recent thing that I'm doing that we talked about is I am starting a project with a partner to offer wellness-focused continuing legal education courses. Again, just getting message out about like what are some practical data-backed tips that people can do to bring more joy and ease into their practice. So you don't have to be like me and, blow up your life. I actually wouldn't recommend that to most people. Like, I wish that I had been a little bit more maybe self-aware to figure out other ways to dial it back and to create more space for all of me to run these kinds of experiments that we've been talking about while I was still at my old job. And I'd say that's the biggest thing that I would really encourage any lawyer, honestly, any professional to do when they're feeling stuck in their career, is to identify one or two little sparks of places that bring you joy, or even just things that you're curious about where you're like, oh man, I really liked ceramics when I was in high school. And like, I think that that's something I would enjoy doing. And very often, again, we make it such a big thing. It's like, honey, just take one ceramics class. See how it feels. Like maybe that one little bit once a week creative outlet turns out to be the thing that creates enough like flex and play in the system that you end up showing up to the rest of your practice and the rest of your life in a different way.
Yeah. Two things from what you just said. One, identifying things from your past that you used to enjoy somehow along the way, especially in our profession, just get pushed to the side. That's super valuable. And also, you remember during the pandemic when people were reflecting on, okay, do I really want to remain in this role? There were people who were doing a lot of self-reflection. I heard one comment that really resonated with me. It's unrealistic to expect that you're going to get all your fulfillment from your job. The elements that you're yearning for, sometimes they're just much better to have outside of your job. So the ceramics example, if you look at that, you're pulling that from your past. Say, oh, I used to enjoy that. But you can't expect to rely on getting that type of enjoyment and fulfillment from your job. Or people who want to do volunteer work on a nonprofit board. There's so much in that you can get that aligns with, your capabilities at work, but maybe you can't get that type of experience at work. So saying like, I'm going to get 100% of my joy and fulfillment at the office, it's still a bit of a recipe for disaster. You're pouring all of your energy into that space. So that really speaks to me. And I got to put on my skeptical hat just for a second to say, all the material you're building and it's going to be data backed, which I think is super helpful. I think it's going to speak to people who, because of the legal approach when they hear meditation teacher, energy worker, I don't profess to know much about those things. And I'll confess, I was a book Buddhist at some point. You were talking about that. Love reading about that, but didn't execute it in my life. You're probably going to have a lot of people who are on the skeptical side. How do you speak to them? Lawyers by nature are skeptical. How do you bring them into the conversation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one thing that we didn't discuss, before I went to law school, I actually started my career in public health as a public health researcher at Columbia University. So I really bring together that like scientific sense of rigor with also being a completely woo out there energy worker. I like to view myself as the bridge between those two worlds. So, we'll take something, in our trainings, we'll talk about things like sleep. And, you probably already know this, but some people I don't think know that, when you are chronically underslept, it's basically as if you are also drunk. And most of us would never practice law while we are inebriated. Like we would not have like four, glasses of whiskey or something like that and then just like try to crank something out. But we will get 4 hours of sleep and try to use that to like finish out a really important piece of work product for a client. So it's things like that of just helping people, one, understand what are the real implications of all of these ways that we are not taking care of ourselves and how they actually can undermine our competence and fitness to practice. But then also on the positive side, using the data to say like, look, if you get out and you do, even just a 30-minute walk or something for yourself each day, it's got these benefits for your brain, these benefits for your cardiovascular health. Like, don't do a call while you're do a call while you're walking, but like, don't call that your your wellness break. Don't listen to Huberman while you're doing it. Like, don't call that your wellness break. Like, really just take some time in nature to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's going to resonate really well within the profession. I mean, lawyers, like we said, initially skeptical, but they're driven by data. And if you show data results that, for example, like sleep, here's some changes that you can make and your results are going to be better, I think that's going to go a long way. And there's tons of data to support that, that sleep is super impactful. And I remember learning, everybody can get different amounts of sleep and you'll all be fine. I'm the type of person who can get 4 hours. The data says that's not true. We all need as human beings a certain amount. And it's viewed if you're, if you're sleeping too much, you're viewed as lazy versus, fueling up your body. And just as an example for me, I remember I got more consistent this past couple years going to the gym very early in the morning. So I was like at the gym at 5, which meant like waking up at like 4. And I was all excited to go see when I had my annual physical, because I'm old enough to be having annual physicals. And I remember, wanting to I was so excited to tell my doctor, he's like a young, cool doctor. And I was telling him I'm being more consistent, workouts, whatever. And he's like, and he gave me the line that you don't want to hear. It began with, at your age. So at your age, sleep is number one, and exercise and nutrition sort of, go down the line. So anyway, so long story short, that's one element that I think you could speak to that people might see more as, oh, that's not for me. But when you look at the data, it actually is. So, I think that's why when we go back to your sort of CLE programming, I think that's why it's going to be super interesting for people. So, when you're bringing the holistic perspective, but also driven by data.
Yeah, that's the hope is that, people have to get these CLEs. So if you're going to sit down and listen to 20 hours of content, like let's make 1 hour of that something that's actually going to be a true investment in yourself.
Yeah. So after all of this, how do you reframe success for yourself? What does success mean to you today versus, say, 5 years ago?
So for me, success means it's simple stuff. It's waking up every day and feeling like genuinely and generally excited to dive into my life. It means running these different experiments to grow different parts of myself. So I was not someone, I had 200 followers on Instagram. It was all my friends and family. And now I'm building an audience of almost 3,000 people on LinkedIn. And that's been a whole lot of fun. It becomes viewing my life as an opportunity for self-discovery and seeing what is it that I like doing? What is it that I don't like doing? And within the law, trying out sitting at all of these different seats at the table. So I've sat in the BigLaw seat, I've sat in the GC seat, I've sat in the burnt out, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore seat. And now, as a vendor, as a CLE provider, as a writer, like there's just so many things that we can do in this life. I really think that this life, even as a lawyer, can be a playground. So I'm just trying to have fun.
I like that. I like that. So what's a boundary that you hold now that past Allison would never have allowed herself?
8 hours of sleep. Like, sorry to go back there, but that is
Yeah.
the thing that I always compromised on. And that is also the area where when I first see myself slipping, that I'm like, like I was just sitting on the computer until 11 o'clock, 2 nights ago or whatever it is. And I have to wake up at 6. Like this is, so I'm going to get 7 hours and past me and be like, oh, 7 hours. Like that's not so bad. Like that's still within the realm of reason, but I know that I don't feel good when I do that. So I really hold myself to firm bedtimes. I'm in bed by 10, if not 9 most nights, and everything else needs to adjust around that.
Nice. Sleep is one of those things where like we resist it, and you sort of dive into Instagram, or these days for me, it's like watching the World Cup late at night and you resist it. But the minute that you are asleep, when it's time for you to wake up, you wish you could be sleeping more than anything else. So it's a strange psychology.
Oh yeah, totally.
So I got, just before I let you go, I've got a quick rapid fire,
All right, let's do it.
Quick questions for you. All right. So give me, is there a book that's really changed your life or perception of things?
Designing Your Life. So this comes out of, I believe, Stanford Business School, and I'm totally forgetting the names of the authors right now. I feel bad about that. But it is an amazing, the book is great. The workbook is magic. And it's a whole bunch of structured experiments, kind of like what I was describing, that can help you, if you're stuck, figure out what is it that brings me joy? What is it that sucks all of the life out of my body? And how can I, to the title, redesign my life around something that really feels exciting for me, is a life that I want to be living.
Nice. A workbook plus a book. I love it. Thank you. Last one. What's one word or a thought for the people listening who've tuned into this episode, who are already interested in making a big change? What's one thing that you think they can do to bring about that change?
It's going to sound funny, but don't overthink it. As lawyers, we're really analytical. We're really good at arguing both sides. And I think that for most of us, when it comes to our own lives, we can overweigh those arguments that are in favor of the status quo. And when the status quo is what's making you miserable, you just can't overthink. You have to trust your gut, and you have to trust your instinct, and probably the other people telling you around you that you're not all right. So don't let analytical reason sort of run rampant. I these days try to take my intuition as like that's where the main signal comes from. And then I use all of these amazing analytical, logical reasoning skills to help implement, whatever it is in the direction that I want to move towards.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Allison. I really appreciate your time. I'll just share that the best place to follow Allison is on LinkedIn and her Substack, Practically on Purpose. And if you're looking for that CLE credit that does more than just check a compliance box, look up Fit to Practice at fittopractice.law. I'll put all of that in the show notes, so don't worry, we'll have that. I really appreciate your time, Allison. It's been awesome. I was happy to be connected on LinkedIn and all the more here. And I really learned a lot from you today. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing what comes from you in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jonathan, and excited to continue the convoy. I feel like this is the first of many.
That was wonderful. I really loved having Allison on. Just super fun. Looking forward to future conversations. All right. So this was the Lawyer to Leader podcast. Being right got you this far. Being a leader will get you further. Follow the show. Grab the free leadership assessment at jonathancullencoaching.com. We'll have that in the show notes. And I'll see you next time.